Hello everybody. First, an apology if my voice sounds a bit scratchy this time. That's because I've been recording an audio book and it's a challenge on the voice. Anyway, let's crack on. Why do you read books? That sounds like a stupid question. I love books, you say. But why? I know why I do. My parents were always readers. There were always books on the shelf, and people in our family valued knowledge. Inside the books were worlds you could escape to, different experiences. There were heroes, empires, mysteries, murders, and mayhem. Excitement. So, escapism and knowing things probably made me a bit more interesting to my mates, although you had to be careful not to be a bookworm, a nerd. Later on, one was obliged to write essays in English class, so it was possible to construct worlds into which I could escape. My imagination worked, and it gave me power over the characters in my stories. So, reading and then writing. Why write? Okay, you had to in school, and you may have to at work. I do. I write long, tedious, detailed reports, and I get paid for it, mostly. Why do it for pleasure? And I do that too. I think there's a deeply ingrained instinct in humans to tell stories. Maybe it's hardwired, a survival instinct. You've been hunting and gathering wood, and you narrowly avoid an attack by a tiger. Around the fire later that night, there's an urgency to tell your tribe about what happened and to warn them about the tiger. You need to get their attention, and so you have to make your story exciting, and a shiver of fear passes through your audience. If you're smart, you might be able to convince them that you can stop the tiger and protect them from any other marauders. Of course, you'll need an extra share from the pot for doing that. In a conversation with the podcaster Lex Fridman, the author Yuval Noah Harari asserts that individually humans have no advantage over chimpanzees or Neanderthals. But what Homo sapiens could do was to cooperate in large numbers. Harari asks, what makes it possible for millions, now billions, of people to cooperate over vast distances? Quote, "It was by stories, fiction. It's the imagination. If you examine any large-scale human cooperation, you always find fiction at its basis. It's a fictional story that holds a lot of strangers together. It's most obvious in the case of religion. You can't convince a group of chimpanzees to come together, to fight a war, to build a cathedral, by promising them that after they die, they'll go to some kind of chimpanzee heaven where you get a lot of bananas and coconuts. No chimpanzee will ever believe that. Humans believe it." End quote. I guess I needed to provide a trigger warning. I'll post the link to the conversation below in the details, and you can take it up with Mr. Dr. Harari directly if you wish to. Harari discusses other aspects of culture, including economics, where he contends that money is the greatest fictional story. That includes Ponzi schemes and cryptocurrencies. After all, the infamous Sam Bankman-Fried, I should call him Scam Bankrupt Fraud, told such a wild story that people dumped all their savings into his cryptocurrency exchange and lost the lot. Humans believe almost anything, which is the basis for politics. Jim Jones had a story, and his followers drank the Kool-Aid. Humans die because of stories. It's not a new idea. In the Canterbury Tales, written in the 14th century by Geoffrey Chaucer, he said, quote, "How potent is the fancy! People are so impressionable they can die of imagination," end quote. This isn't a political channel, so don't worry, no rant about the consistent supply of fictional stories we get from the government. All of the governments. As Harari says, it's what we do. If you bore your audience, you lose them, and you lose all the money, power, and status that goes with that. There's a huge incentive to embellish the truth, make for excitement, and the most exciting thing is usually mystery and fear, which is pretty much the basis of the greatest story of all. After all, the parables are stories with a message made to appeal to our common sense and experience. Let's not go there. I'd rather opine about Buddhism, where I'm less likely to get stoned or burned at the stake. The Buddha talked about life as it is and how to tackle it. Pretty boring. He managed to teach because of his charisma and not, unusually, by claiming that he had direct access to God who had spoken to him as a prophet. His message was his understanding, based on logic, though he naturally had a supporting backstory about arduous ascetic meditation. However, not long after he died, the panoply of Hindu gods was co-opted with visions of hell and nirvana, and an actual cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, depending on what a good person you were. If you were bad, you might be reborn as a dog, and serve you right. Much more exciting. Enough of me beating on the stories that underlie most of our beliefs. Why do people tell them? Well, it's pretty obvious. If you're good at it, you get status and money, and sometimes power, all of which, of course, you defend to the death. The Spanish Inquisition was not there because it followed the teachings of Jesus Christ. It was there to defend the temporal power of the Catholic Church. Oops, there I go again. Triggering somebody somewhere. Back to literature. Let's take a look at some famous authors. Selected at random, I asked ChatGPT to help and see why they wrote. Let's start with George Orwell's 1984. He warns about totalitarianism, censorship, and the abuse of power. He was concerned about authoritarian government and the erosion of individual freedoms. J.K. Rowling, Harry Potter. Well, she wrote to avoid her personal struggles, to create a world in which she could escape to, and talk about some of the moral values that she held close and dear to herself. Harper Lee, To Kill a Mockingbird, is a powerful critique of racial injustice and societal prejudice in the American South of the 1930s. The book was inspired by her observations and her own experience of deeply ingrained racism in her community. F. Scott Fitzgerald, The Great Gatsby, reflects excesses and moral decay, the hollowness of materialism, and the unattainable nature of romantic fantasies. Fitzgerald was also exploring his own experiences of wealth, society, status and love. Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein in a friendly competition with her husband and some friends to while away a rainy afternoon in Geneva. So it was really for fun. But she did add in some concerns about the advancement of science. So, what are we dealing with here? Concern about the unchecked control by government, 1984. Escape from reality, Harry Potter. Outrage at racism and injustice, To Kill a Mockingbird. Social comment and personal discovery, The Great Gatsby. And of course, fun and entertainment, with a dose of horror to build up the excitement. Personal, social, and artistic reasons. All with some kind of a message. As I said, even Frankenstein reflects the author's concern with the advancement of science and the idea that somehow life can be created artificially. And Harry Potter talks about moral values and beliefs. I wonder if this makes for great literature, an element of teaching or bringing valuable insights to the tribe, disguising the important message about the marauding tiger in a story that grabs the tribe's attention. And now I'll answer the question about why do I write? Certainly not for money. We can talk about that in another episode. Not for status, though I admit I like seeing my name on the front cover of a book. It's my creation. Just mine. Good or bad. Every last comma and full stop. No client to satisfy. Just myself. Fun is the reason. I enjoy the process. For me, it's like completing a jigsaw puzzle or constructing some kind of physical object, say out of Lego bricks, although I never played with Lego bricks as a child. I have a framework or a general idea, but the picture is unknown. I start my research, and that's exciting. As the story goes, the picture begins to form, and I get drawn in, and my characters explore ideas and places that I've hardly ever thought about. Who knew I would write about Spain, Islamic Spain in the 11th century, where the Moors were confronting the Christians? Or that I would get into the details of the Battle of Hastings? Why would a U-boat that sank in the 1940s affect the cracking of the Enigma Code and the eventual defeat of Nazi Germany? And yes, there are some lessons to be learned and ideas about philosophy, religion, politics to explore. But these are not the point. I'm not an educator, nor do I have a particular message to promote, except that humans are interesting and they're far more dangerous with their fictions and stories than any tiger. Thanks a lot. If you enjoyed this episode, give me a like, please subscribe, and see you next time.